city of Oakland. This is an event we try to do each year. Mainly it's focused on transportation-related topics, but as sustainability becomes more important to organizations, we've realized that it spills over where you think you're just in transportation, but then you're getting battery electric vehicles, you're looking at solar panels. Some folks have fuel cells deployed, stationary fuel cells that they use to power their vehicles. So then we realize it's becoming more about clean energy and sustainability, and how do we, all share what we're doing, and how do we incorporate best practices. So it's not, although it's primarily transportation focused, you'll see a little spillover into other areas, and that's how we got here. So anyway, we're a little bit behind schedule. This is how we do it. We don't rush to get the agenda started, try to let folks get settled and arrive. I see a lot of familiar faces out in the audience, and that's great, but I see a lot of new faces too, and I think that's might be even better. So once again, thank you all for attending. This morning, we're honored to have Janea Scott, the Vice Chair of the California Energy Commission, here to start our agenda. Janea is now Vice Chair of the California Energy Commission, the state's primary energy policy and planning agency. Ms. Scott was appointed by Governor Edmund G. Brown Jr. in February 2013 and reappointed in January 2016 to serve as the Commission's public member. She is the lead commissioner on transportation, which is why we've got her here today. That wasn't in the script. That's why I couldn't enunciate it. Ms. Scott serves as the chair of the Western Interconnection Regional Advisory Body and is on the Public Policy Board of VELAZ, a nonprofit founded by the public and private sector to advance the electric car movement. She is also a member of the California Fuel Cell Partnership and the U.S. Department of Energy's Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technical Advisory Committee. Prior to joining the Energy Commission, Ms. Scott worked at the U.S. Department of the Interior in the Office of the Secretary as the Deputy Counselor for Renewable Energy and at Environmental Defense Fund as a senior attorney in the Climate and Air Program. Ms. Scott earned her J.D. from the University of Colorado Boulder Law School and her MS and BS in Earth Systems from Stanford University. So that's impressive. But on top of all that, you may not be aware of this. She's also a queen of electric vehicles. Raise your hand if you knew that. Okay. So I don't want to spoil the season because it's about to restart in April 2019, but in the next season of Game of Thrones, she actually has a role. She is the queen of EVs, so she's going to take on the Targaryens and the Starks as they wrestle for control of Westeros. I'm sorry, I watched Game of Thrones. I had to throw in a little plug there. So with that, let's welcome Janea Scott up to the panel. Now I got to make sure these mics work, right? All right, well, thanks again for joining us here today. And I apologize for dredging up the Queen of Electric Vehicles, but I thought that was cool because it's not a super recent award. It dates back a few years, but it just demonstrates your commitment, interest, and involvement in not just electric vehicles, but also clean transportation. Mm-hmm. So before we jump into our conversation here, can you tell us a little bit about the Energy Commission and the role that it plays for the state of California, and then sort of how you work collaboratively with the Air Resources Board to work towards the same goal?
Yes, indeed. Well, good morning, everyone. And I just want to say, Richard, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here at the AltCar Expo in Oakland. So I'm a commissioner at the California Energy Commission, as you heard. I'm the lead on transportation. And as you mentioned, the Energy Commission is the state's primary energy planning and permitting agency. And so we oversee quite a few things that touch on energy, whether it's building standards, appliance standards. We work a little bit on helping to certify the Renewable Portfolio Standard. And then we have the transportation program. And our transportation program is authorized through Assembly Bill 8. And it gives the Energy Commission up to $100 million each year for transforming transportation. And the legislature's asked us to put that into a broad portfolio of transportation-related things. And so it goes into infrastructure for zero-emission vehicles, both your plug-in electrics and also your fuel cell electrics. It goes into the medium-duty and heavy-duty space, and some of that's infrastructure, some of that's vehicles. We've got some great partnerships with folks, including 6 ports in California, so I'd be happy to talk about that more. Port of Oakland, Port of Stockton, Port of Wainimi, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and San Diego. I always go in north to south order or south to north order because I love them all the same. So we're working with them. They've been great to kind of kick the tires on a lot of the different types of equipment and test it out. We have a little bit of the funding that goes into low carbon fuels and trying to make sure that we have low carbon fuel production right here in California. And if you're counting the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with it, it's great for it to be right here because you don't have to add the transport emissions onto that. And then we have a little bit of a workforce training and manufacturing component as part of the program as well.
Great. Well, I'm glad you mentioned ports because obviously the Port of Oakland is the most important of those in California, but it's great that you acknowledge the lesser ports as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the specific activities that are taking place in the ports?
Yeah, so the Energy Commission and the ports put together a ports collaborative about 4, maybe almost 5 years ago now. And it's actually a little bit broader than transportation, but one of the things we were thinking about is the ports are great collaborators. They're great places to innovate and try out some of these different technologies that we're looking toward. And they were interested in partnering with the commission because they're also looking to try out some of these technologies. I don't think I have to tell anyone in the room that ports tend to be hotspots for pollution. And so also ratcheting down emissions near ports as best we can is great for the port, but it's also very good for the community that's around the port. And so some of the work that we're doing is with microgrids and renewable energy. And that's because, as you probably know, ports are interested in being resilient in the face of bad weather or any other kinds of disasters. They need to be able to stay up and running to move the cargo through. So some things like that. And then we're also working on vehicles and infrastructure. And it's been really great. The ports have really been good partners in demonstrating these technologies. We've started maybe with 5 vehicles, 7 vehicles, 10 or 12 vehicles. And they call it, I call it a shakedown run because that's what you call it when you take out a ship. They're really doing the shakedown run to see what these look like. Does it work? How do well, they all work, but do the drivers like driving them? How long does it take to train folks? Where do you put charging infrastructure at a port, right? So a lot of times where the cargo goes is moving all around at the ports, and so putting in a permanent structure for charging may or may not work very well. And so kind of thinking through where you would put in the infrastructure, how to charge up the vehicles at times when they're not being used so that you're not impacting the duty cycle, all kinds of things like that. They've been really willing to work with us and try it out.
Great. Well, I know the fleet managers in the room are well acquainted with duty cycles and utilization and surveying drivers, so it's really refreshing and reassuring to hear that acknowledged and communicated at your level. But so in addition to the ports, what are some other areas of focus for the Energy Commission in the future?
Great. So we are also working on the infrastructure. So that's one part that I think is really exciting. Working to roll out the charging infrastructure for the plug-in electric vehicles, and we're also rolling out the hydrogen refueling infrastructure for fuel cell electric vehicles. And for me, as long as there's no tailpipe pollution, I'm happy, right? It's great for clean air. It's good for climate. Lots of different reasons that you want no tailpipe pollution. On the passenger car side, as I'm sure I don't have to tell folks in the room, people don't buy cars for rational reasons necessarily. They buy it because it's really pretty, or that one has a beautiful blue color, or this one is the one I'm going to drive across the country someday. And so we just need lots of options for consumers to choose from to make this transition to zero emission vehicles. On the timeline we're talking about like a 2030, 2040 time frame, which sounds really far, but it's like 10 years until 2030 and about 20 years until 2040. And that's a big transition that we're trying to make. So we're working to get infrastructure in place out ahead of the vehicles so that people, when they're thinking about what kind of passenger car they'd like, say, oh yeah, there's a charger at my grocery store, there's a charger at my movie theater, there's a charger at the bottom of the hiking trail that I like to use all the time. There's chargers at my work. So we're really trying to think through how to get charging infrastructure so it is pretty ubiquitous, so people don't need to worry about when and where to charge up if when they make the choice to go electric.
Well, electric and hydrogen seem to be the fuels of great focus currently. Can you tell us a little bit about the hydrogen program? Because I think we're up to maybe 40 stations in the state. And the reason I don't know exactly is because it's changing every day. We're constructing more and more of these stations along the hydrogen highway, which, you know, that phrase was coined a while ago, but it's actually coming to fruition. So can you give us a little overview of where hydrogen's at and where it should be?
Sure. So where we are at with hydrogen right now, you're exactly right. We have 39 hydrogen refueling stations in California. I know, right? And so we're aiming for an initial network, backbone network of about 100 stations to start connecting the state. Governor Brown then put out a goal to have 200 hydrogen stations by 2025 for the state. We obviously need many, many more than that, but we've got 39 of them that are open retail. We actually have the world's largest open retail network of hydrogen stations. There are a few countries that have more hydrogen stations than California, but they're not open retail in the way that you drive up, you put your credit card in, you grab the fueling dispenser, you put it in the car, 3 to 7 minutes later, your car is full and you're on your way. So they're open, they're very user friendly. I like to remind people, when you learned how to drive, I'm pretty sure one of your parents showed you how to put gasoline in the car at least once or twice. And that's all you need on hydrogen, right? You learn how to do it once or twice, you're good to go. It's not scary. So we've got that. We have about 64 stations that are funded, and so they are in the process of getting the permitting and being constructed. They're all kind of in different phases. And we have a new solicitation that is being designed, so folks should keep an eye out for that if you're interested in hydrogen refueling network to kind of get the next round of hydrogen stations going. And it's pretty great. I mean, right now you can drive from Southern California to Northern California. I know because Chairwoman Mary Nichols from the Air Resources Board, Tyson Eckerly from the Governor's Office of Business Economic Development, and I and a few friends, we did it. We started in Santa Monica. We drove to Harris Ranch, filled up the cars there. Also, we had 6 of them at the time that on our little caravan. In about a half an hour, got back on the road, went to Sacramento. And the legislature was in session, so we invited them all over to a local restaurant for tacos and tequila and to tell them what we'd been doing that day. So you have to drive on I-5 for right now, but you can, the state is starting to be connected, so it's very exciting.
Well, that sounds like a really fun road trip.
It was fun.
But actually, you were demonstrating that the technology actually is viable and it works. Mm-hmm. So again, thank you for going out there and walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
You're welcome.
But I'm going to steer just a little bit maybe from the transportation side, because you mentioned the Energy Commission and the role it plays with energy as the big picture. Where do you see opportunities in the future for California energy production within the state?
Wow. So for production within the state is a tough question. One of the things that I'm thinking about for energy in California is as we're working our way towards 100% clean energy standard that the legislature passed last year, is I think our systems are going to start being a lot more interconnected with one another in terms of in the middle of the day when we have extra solar in California, you might want to use that to run your electrolyzer that makes hydrogen, right? And then hydrogen can either be used in the stationary side, right, or it can go into the transportation side. And all of a sudden, and you can put hydrogen into the pipeline, right? And so all of a sudden, all of our energy systems are starting to fit together in a way that I think is very cutting edge, and folks haven't had it. That's something that it's intriguing for me to keep thinking about. Or you might want to charge up your vehicles probably in the middle of the day, right, when we have lots and lots of extra solar, and that means where you put the infrastructure needs to be where people are during the day, right? So that kind of leans you more towards workplaces and things like that. So I've been thinking a lot about how the natural gas system, the electric system, and the transportation system fit together in a way that they can work really smartly together as we kind of are ratcheting down to have this carbon neutral economy.
Great. Well, I'm just now realizing that being like an interviewer is much more difficult than being a moderator, because I've got to be thinking a couple of steps ahead with these questions. And I really liked your response there, because it makes me acknowledge, or makes me focus on the fact that what we've thought about historically, energy production, refineries, and power generation plants, it's that paradigm is really being broken apart to, we may be looking at more smaller scale production facilities. When you talk about a home solar system, all of a sudden that's a fueling station, or maybe there's wind generation. So is there some thought at the Energy Commission of maybe encouraging or incentivizing these smaller scale projects, or is the Energy Commission mainly focused on the big production projects?
We do a little bit of all of it, and anything that's 50 megawatts or bigger that's thermal, the Energy Commission does the permitting for those facilities. So things like wind or PV solar are not thermal. That's the permitting for that's done by the county. We don't have very many. I don't think we actually have any active siting cases for anything that's 50 megawatts or bigger right now, and that may change. We're also have a research program. It's called the Electric Public Interest Charge. And it's called the EPIC program, and it has research dollars. And so they're looking at different things like energy storage, second use battery life, some of those kind of components that then help fit the grid together. And then because we do the building standards, we're often thinking about how to make buildings more energy efficient. And this is another place where I think we have to be mindful of what we do. So Commissioner McAllister at the Energy Commission oversees our building standards, and he's working very hard to decrease the amount of energy a building uses. And I work on transportation, and I want to plug a bunch of cars into the building, so I'm working to ratchet up how much energy a building uses. And so making sure that our policies are designed in a smart way so that both of those can come together and not unintentionally undercut where we're trying to go, because a policy about a building or about cars doesn't kind of take into account how those things fit together. One of the other things that's great about my job is we have the Integrated Energy Policy Report at the Energy Commission. If you are an energy nerd like I am, it's really pretty awesome. We have a chance to bring in experts from all around the world to talk to us and tell us what their take on many of these tough issues, many of these future issues are. They come in, they provide information, they provide a panel, and then you kind of write up the report each year to see what it looks like. So we have a chance to really talk to other leaders from around the world about what they're thinking in this space to help make us smarter about what we're doing too. And then we've got an analytics shop, and the analytics shop is looking to see what do they think demand is going to be, and and they start with just straight up demand, and then you have to tweak that based on electric vehicles. Okay, that's pushing the demand up a little, but then energy efficiency, that's pushing the demand down a little. What does all of that look like when you put it together? So we have the shop that's doing the analytics behind a lot of this as well.
Great. I know we're getting a little bit near the end of the session, and I will open it up for some questions in just a moment. But I wanted to give you an opportunity, if there's any particular message you'd like to share with the group, or if there's a particular goal of the Energy Commission that you're most proud of, can you share those thoughts with us?
Yeah, sure. So the program that I oversee, we're calling it the Clean Transportation Program. That's its nickname. Its real name is the Alternative and Renewable Fuel and Vehicle Technology Program, or ARFVTP. So the acronym's not a lot better. So we're trying to make sure people know what we're talking about. And that program last year it was its 10th year in existence, and I'm really proud of the work that the staff has done in that space. We've got that Ports Collaborative that's part of that, and has brought in the ports and is really testing out the equipment and also the infrastructure. There were no hydrogen stations 10 years ago. Now there are 39. There's 5,500 of those vehicles and many more on their way. So it's neat to see the changes that have taken place in the 6 years even that I've been at the commission. I think a message in this space with electric vehicles and the infrastructure is a really important component. So for folks who are with fleets and are thinking about this, please don't forget the infrastructure component. That's a really that's a big one, right? You need to be able to plug in or fuel up with the hydrogen. And I'm thinking a lot about what does this look like at scale? So we've been doing demonstration projects where you have maybe 2, let's say, buses or 5 buses. And where you put the charging equipment for that is not as big of a deal as if I'm trying to do 100 buses or 500 buses and they park the way that you do when you bring back a rental car. Right, to Enterprise or to wherever, they go in line with each other. So where does the charging infrastructure look like if I want all of those vehicles to be electrified? Do I need to put some solar on top? Do I need to put some storage along with it so that they don't get hit with demand charges? It's really fun to kind of think about what does this look like at scale. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about over the next few years at the Energy Commission is to demonstrate at scale and see what this looks like at scale. And you all know, but the reason we're working so hard to transform the transportation sector is it's 40% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. It's 80% of our smog-forming nitrogen oxides and about 90% of the diesel particulate matter. So to meet the clean air standards that we need to meet here in the state, to meet the climate goals we have in the state, and then it's just the clean energy revolution, right? There's all kinds of jobs and great economic benefits that are associated with it as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking towards.
Oh, that's great. With that, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions from the audience.
I know that PG&E was tasked with helping. I know that PG&E was going to be helping to develop the electric charging station up and down the state, and with their corporate challenges, how does the timeline look for that right now, or is that unclear?
I think I have not been, so there is a team of people working on PG&E. I'm not on that team, so I don't have any details or granularity into that. But it is something for us to be mindful of in terms of the both on the renewable portfolio standard, right, the clean energy standard, trying to get charging equipment, all of the things that the utility are helping us to do and hopefully accelerate, right? And so it is something we need to be mindful of, but I don't have any specifics for you on that. What else? Ask questions.
Hello, Mikko Laitinen Neste. Thank you for interesting presentation. Just wanted to ask you why and where you think we would need hydrogen in the future. Thank you.
I think hydrogen has lots of great opportunities that are associated with it. Right now, it can go in the passenger car. So there's 4 or 5 different passenger cars that are available right now. We need many, many more. They're following behind the trajectory of the plug-in electric vehicles. Again, anything that has no tailpipe pollution to me it's on its way to where we're trying to go. Hydrogen is exciting to me as well because in the medium duty and heavy duty space, there's a lot of potential that we may not have quite yet on the battery electric side. For example, like the Class 8 long haul trucks, the batteries are still really, really big for that. It takes up a lot of the payload, and that kind of defeats the purpose then. But fuel cells have a nice niche that they can fit into there. And then I think on hydrogen, again, there's the possibility to have this kind of hydrogen economy. There's already lots of things that are moving along in hydrogen, but connecting them together as we try to get to the 100% clean energy standard, I think will be really useful. So again, you could run your electrolyzer off of solar electricity that's in the middle of the day, and all of a sudden you really do have this completely carbon-free loop. And so I think some of the possibilities for that are exciting on hydrogen as well. What else?
We understand it's difficult to talk or focus on specific fuels because it's like having children, and it's you're not supposed to identify favorites. We treat them all the same, but the reality is some deploy earlier or quicker, some advance more rapidly. But I know the Energy Commission is focused on ensuring that all the fuels move forward so we can meet the governor's goals as the state moves forward to a zero emission transportation sector, and then also the state as a whole. Are there any? Do we have any more questions?
Well, on that topic, the other reason that it's a portfolio is because, and I know I don't need to tell folks in this room that, but there are lots and lots of different vehicles on road. There's construction equipment, mining equipment, ships, trains, airplanes, things that are hauling really heavy things. There's lots of different types of vehicles and duty cycles, and so having different near zero or zero emission technologies, I think we also need, because not all of those solutions are going to fit all of the duty cycles. So we need the smartest ones attached with the best duty cycles.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there is no one solution. Each application should be analyzed individually. And there are certain niches where certain fuels seem to work better than others. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, fleet managers in the room will tell you the same thing. What works for one fleet that looks very similar may not necessarily work for another. We had a question over there, John?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of local government representatives here in the room today, and I'm just wondering if you could give them some guidance on how best to engage with the CEC and partner both for resource acquisition and also for planning and technical assistance.
Yeah, that's a great question. We love partnerships and collaborations. So please do feel free to reach out to us anytime. There's lots of information on our webpage. If you find a specific topic that you're interested in, I would encourage people to sign up for the listserv so that you make sure you're getting the notification. Don't sign up. Well, you can if you want to. You might not sign up for the whole Energy Commission listserv, or you might get filled, your inbox get filled with different opportunities that are taking place at the commission. But the targeted things that you are interested in, I would recommend signing up. That's a great way to be engaged with the commission. We recognize that not everyone can get to Sacramento all the time, so we do a lot of the informational sessions through WebEx, so you can watch on your computer. A lot of times those are also posted later, so you can watch later, or you can even just dial in and listen, which is maybe not quite as good because you don't have the opportunity to see the slides. And the other thing, we're also working. A lot of times we'll put out planning opportunities. So one of the things we have recently done is our EV ready communities. And so we let communities decide for themselves, what is your community and where would you like to put charging infrastructure around your community? So that first round was dollars to put your plan in place. The second round will be those folks who won the planning dollars come back and compete to the Energy Commission to get money to actually implement the plan they put in place. But one of the things that's exciting about the plans to me is I'm hoping that they come back and they're all, spectacular, great with done with flying colors. If the Energy Commission isn't able to fund everything, maybe Clean Cities can, maybe your POU can, maybe your air district can, right? But you'll have a great plan that's already laid out there for where some of this infrastructure can go. And so we're always trying to think about things like that in order to work really well with local and regional partners. And we're open to ideas. So if people have ideas for me about how we can continue to do things like that, please let me know. I mean, we love to collaborate. We can't do it all, but we we need help.
That was a great question, John. And we found the Energy Commission very receptive in the past, soliciting the constituency, like focus groups, asking specific groups, fleet managers, elected officials, government officials, hey, where are the needs and how can we meet these needs? But then the other piece is, hey, we got these existing programs, tell us how we can make them better. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your leadership in the area.
Well, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Well, with that, I'd like to thank Commissioner Scott for spending some time with us here this morning on the panel. I understand she's going to be here for just a little bit. And our next session will begin at 10:10. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you.